Hi guys, in this video I will show you how to create a render of a clock. Especially this is a Casio digital model, and now I show you how to create the environment and also the textures for create a good black studio lighting for it. Okay, so first of all I want to create the materials of this uh, model. So I create a new Vray advanced material and name it Casio. This is a downloaded model, so I have also the texture made from another artist, and I will use it to recompose my material here. So first of all, go to the diffuse, and in the texture node I will apply this material color here. Oh, sorry, I want to save it. Save this one to create the perfect path. So Casio that. Okay. Now simply drag and drop, and okay, the path is good now. And I want to apply it to my shader. As you can see, my model is very dark, and I want to have this display in this mode, but the rest of the model was made of steel, so I wanted to activate my specular layer and set some tweaks of it. I think a Fresnel layer of 10 works good for me. And after doing this, I want to apply to it my reflection map. Okay. And maybe we can set it up to overlay and also set the black point to 0.2 to increase the contrast between the screen and the other parts of the model that I want in metal looks. After doing this, I want to set up my scene, so I go to my environment because I want to use an HDRI map in this environment slot. I also have this one, and I usually really like to set it up a filter on it and desaturate it because I want a clean color of my model. So I want to show the clean color of my model. So I'm going to go all the way down with saturation, and I think maybe 20 on multiplier. It works good for what I want to do. Okay. Now I want a backdrop for my scene. So I create a simple plane, a very big one. Maybe we can scale it down a bit, something like this, and move it backwards, something like this. Now duplicate it with Control and drag it. I scale it down, and this one will be my visible background because I want to create a little spot in my background to increase the contrast from the scene and the object. Then doing this, I set it up my camera. So I go to Vray Bridge, camera, physical camera, set it up the white balance to neutral and the vignetting to 0. And now I start to play with it. I think 50 mils or 70 mils works good for this scene, maybe 50s. Yes, I really like these effects. And set it up the scene, the composition of my object. I want a centered one situation. And After doing this, I create a protection tag so I cannot move accidentally my camera. Now it's time to create two shaders for my background. The first one is a simple black material, so I'm going to maybe 2%, and I want to apply it on the farthest plane, duplicate it, and in the diffuse layer I want to create a gradient map, circular one, and position an effect of this type on it with a very low contrast. Something like this could be good. And apply it on my shader. As you can see, I have recreated this bright spot on the back of my model, and this increased the contrast between this model and the background, and I really nice this kind of effect on the Black Studio setup. And after doing this, I wanna, with my UV settings, I wanna change a bit the UV to balancing my scene. Maybe we can try to rotate a bit plane, and there we go. The basic settings of our scene is set it up. So let's see what happened in my render. Okay, I think it's a good start, but we have to change a little things. So I want to have more blurry reflection on my object. So I usually go to my specular layer and I want to apply to it the material glossiness texture. There we go. And also increase the bump effects by applying on it my normal map. And set it up to normal in tangent space. I think it's work good, but maybe we're going to tweak later. And the mount to about 0.5 centimeter. So now let's see what happened in our render. I think it's most convincing than the previous one. As you can see, this kind of reflection is very strange, and I really like the effect on it. I think we have too much light stop from my model in the background. As you can see, I have a very dark areas here, and so I want to change a bit the position of my planes on the background to see what happens. So I deactivate the farthest one and see what happened in our render. Nothing changed, so we can tweak a bit in other mode. So I reactivate this one because it gives me more comfortable to create the scene. And after doing this, I'm going again to my material of this object, and I want to activate also the second layer of specularity. Okay, here we go. As you can see, I have created a nice reflections on my screen, and also the model looks more convincing. and I really like this kind of effect. I create these shadows here, this rim here, and a reflection spot here. This is very, very good. And so now it's time to tweak the basic metals to create a more convincing look. I think the first thing to do is uh, correct the exposure of the whole scene because it's too low. And after this, I think it's time to create the little spots of light here and maybe something like here to increase the realism of this model. So I stop this render, go to my shader of the watch here, and on the second specular layer I'm going to set it up to 0.95 to create a little bit of blurriness on the second reflection layer because I want a little more blurry ones. Also in this glossiness I want to increase a little bit the effects of it, so I want to set it up to 0.75 and reflection glossiness to 0.5. That brings me a little more blurry reflection of the metal. After doing this, maybe we can try to tweak a bit the white point to 1.1, maybe 1.5, no, so 0.9, good. Maybe we can try with 0.8, see what happens in my render. As you can see, I have more blurriness reflection, and I really like this kind of effect. But I think it's too much because I don't see now the reflection of these parts here. So I wanna set it up to 0.99, see what's the difference. Here we go. So we have a little bit of blurriness on this reflection, but not too much like before. Maybe we can try to tweak it to 0.9075 and see the differences. There we go. We have a little bit of reflections blurriness here, but not too heavy here like this. So I can clearly see the differences of reflection spots on the front of my model, and I really like this kind of effect. After doing this, I want to set it up a little bit better, the exposure of my camera, and I think we have a good settings to about 200 of film ISO, and maybe we can try to set it up the exposure speed to maybe 160, so I have 23 stop increment on shutter speed. Here we go. Think the wall model it's look more convincing, but I wanted to reduce the power of the luminosity on my background because it's too evident now. So I'm going here and reduce this one to maybe something like an half and restart render to see the differences. Okay, I think the basic model is good. Now for finishing the render, I wanna add some little spotlight on these edges and also on these ones. So to do this, I simply create a new rectangular light. Maybe we can see better with the display in quick shading, so the lights doesn't affect my scene for this moment. And with my light set it up, I want to scale it down to the proper position, set it up something like this, and I want to see, doesn't see it in my scene, and see what it's look like in my render. Nothing changed, so to quickly see better the results, go to my sorry, the orientation of my lights is good, okay, and I'm going to interactive render region, so I can quickly see the differences of lighting, and pump it up the power of my lights to maybe 50, maybe 500. Okay, I think it's create a little bit of brightness on these parts here. Maybe we can try to set it up to half, 250. Stop the interactive render region. Take it for a while, duplicate it, scale it down to a proper form, and put it on the side of my model in a position like this to see what it look like. So let's see what happened in our render now. As you can see, I have brightened up these parts, but I don't really like to see this kind of effects. So I think the problem is the forest lights, and I think I don't want it to use it. Or maybe we can try to a very thin effects by maybe decrease it by a fourth and see the differences. It's also too evidenced. We can try to reduce again by an half these lights. This light is the farthest lights, so this one, as you can see in this corner of my image, and I think we have a more convincing look on it. But I don't like this kind of effects it creates on these parts, so I think my lights is not good for this moment, so I simply turn off this one and work. Let's concentrate on this one here. So I make it bigger, put it a more edge kind of lights, and see what it's look like in the render. Okay, as you can see, we have some bright spots. I will delete the previous bright spots in these areas. I don't really like these parts here, so I stop it. Reactivate our interactive render region. And maybe we can try to deactivate for a bit my environment so I can visualize better my power of the lights on my model, and simply tweaks this light. Do something. Let's bring lights on the side of my model, but not on the back parts. I think something like this could be good. So now I want to create a copy of these lights to create the rim on the other side, as you can see here. Okay, I think this kind of effect is what I want, but I really like to reduce a bit the power of this size to maybe 1 to 5. Try with some different values. Maybe we can try with 50. Yeah, good. I think I really like this overexposed area and this feathers reflection here. So when I'm happy with it, I simply turn off my interacting render region, reset my multiplier of my environment to 20s, and see what happens in our render. As you can see, the difference are more convincing now. And I think I really like this kind of effects compared with the previous one. This one is only GI and environment, HDRI, and this one is with the two lights on my model. Maybe the last thing to do, I think, is reduce a bit these lights because it's too powerful on this area, and I want to add some spots here by move it a little bit backward and increase its dimension on the 8s. So stop it, make it more less powerful, so 40 for me is good. Put it a little bit backwards and scale it up a bit. Something like this could be fine. and see the differences. Okay, as you can see, I have a more bright spot here, and also this really thin spots here that I really like. And I think for me the model is very good. Okay, last thing to do, I think, is try to work with my second layers, because I want to use it on this reflection on these parts is very good, but I don't want this ugly reflection on this on the metal parts of the model. So I can control it on the specular layer. Maybe we can try with a fall-off map, so maybe we can try with a Fresnel map. When I'm in front, I have full reflections, and in back I have no reflection. So I again go to my interactive render region, disable the other reflections, so I can clearly see what happens, but the, the reflections is too low, so I cannot see good results. Maybe we can try with invert this effects. Yes, I think it's good. So I can clearly I cannot separate the reflection on this with this method, so I think we can try to another one. So I clear this shader, and maybe we can try with a map, so I can copy this one, and maybe we can try to paste it. Okay, and let's try to reset it to Z1 and 0 to embed the map. Okay, now we can try to reduce a bit the black to 0.6, maybe 0.5. There we go. So we have this reflection on my display here, but I don't have more ugly reflections on the other parts of the model. Maybe we can try to increase the contrast a little bit by 0.1. There we go. So I have a full reflection here and some little spots here, but I think this is good, and no other reflection on the metal parts. Let's create an ugly reflection spots. So after doing this, stop the interactive render region, reactivate my second layer, and see what happens in our render. As you can see, I have reduced some ugly reflection here because I want a more flat surface on it, and because the metal is look more convincing in this case. And after doing this, I can maybe increase a little bit the reflection power on the metal. So I stop it, go to specular layer number 1, and maybe we can try to add more contrast from white and black to 0.7. Okay, maybe 0.5. Good. And see what happens in our render now. And I think it's a very good results. Maybe it's too much powerful in these areas, so I can adjust it to 0.6. See the differences. And I think it's more convincing, but very well, metalless from this base is not very metal effects, but this one it's look very nice for me. Okay, for finish the render, I usually decrease the contrast of my spots on my background because it's too evident now. So I'm going to this the material that's control the backgrounds and decrease the color of it and see what happens in our render now. There we go. I think the whole scene works more better than the previous one. I really like this kind of very little soft spots on the background to increase the contrast with my watch, and I think it's a very good render. I hope you enjoyed these parts of the tutorial, and in the second parts I will show you how to create the post-processing of this uh, effect of this image to in Photoshop to maybe increase a little bit the realism of this render. So when the render is finished, I will show you how to post-produce it in Photoshop. Here we are in Photoshop to complete this images with a quick post-production. What I usually like to do is duplicate my layer and apply to the duplicate camera raw filter. That's it's a tool for photo editing, but I really like to use it also on my render and start tweaking my scene by increase a little bit my exposure. Maybe we can try to reduce a little bit our highlights effects, so something like this could be more convincing. Decrease a little bit the shadows, also the whites, increase textures. As you can see, I pop up the front parts of the display. Maybe we can try with add some clarity on it. Good. And start with vibrance to increase a little bit of power on my color of the display. Okay, maybe something like this could be good. We can sharpen it, the model a little and reduce a bit the noise effect. Maybe we can try also to add a little distortion effect to simulate the lens of a DSLR camera. Doing this, I open up in Photoshop and see the differences. I think the second one with a little bit of post-production is very good image, and maybe we can try to duplicate it, apply to it a blur effect, Gaussian blur, maybe a little bit blur to 3.4, duplicate it because I want to reuse this this layer to another option. And on this one I want to create a layer mask, fill it with black, and start paint on it with white to create a little bit of differences from front and back parts. Okay, when I am happy with it, I can control the effects with the opacity of my map. Maybe we can try with 50 to add a little bit of blurriness, but not too much on my model. After doing this, as I told you before, my duplicated blurred layer, and with this one I set it up to overlay. I think it's good to create some bright spots on my model. Fill the mask with black and start painting on the mask to increase a little bit of effects on my model. There we go. I think it pops up my display is very good. Maybe we can try to reduce a little bit the effects of this layer and try to add some differences spots by reveal this layer a bit in some parts of my model. Okay, as you can see, this is my image. This is my final image made in Photoshop, and I hope you enjoy this kind of tutorial and see you at the next video. Bye!